The Nether is not normal. In fact, it shouldn't even exist. Allow me to explain. The Nether, the second dimension of Minecraft, was added to the game back in October of 2010. Since then it has received many updates, but consistently, it has remained as the hell of the Minecraft universe. Now, players can access this hell by a 4x5 frame of obsidian within the overworld, and then setting it ablaze. And so, let's go in. For every block that we travel here, within the Nether, it corresponds to 8 blocks being travelled within the overworld. Now, unlike the overworld, the Nether has both a bedrock floor and ceiling, whereas the overworld only has the bedrock floor. Now that ceiling spawns at Y level 128, but that isn't the height limit of the Nether. In reality, you can actually get onto the Nether roof, and you can build whatever you want. Well, up to Y level 256. So, in a way, that Nether roof marks as a halfway point in terms of the vertical axes of the Nether, splitting it into 2 distinct worlds. Above, we have the endless flat expanse, and below, we have the boiling cramped domain that we're all very familiar with. The land of this realm is primarily made of netherrack, a weak red cobblestone-like material that breaks easily, and can somehow hold eternal flames when ignited. Occasionally you might find pockets of nether gold, or quartz ore, or even ancient debris mixed amongst this blood-stained stone. But other times you'll find blackstone, a tough, charred stone that's only found within the Nether. Dotted across these deadly lands, misshapen orbs of glowstone appear, giving some additional light to this mostly dark realm. Unlike the familiar blue seas of the overworld, the Nether is home to massive lava oceans, boiling pools that will cook you alive. Unless, of course, you are subscribed, in which case, you'll be perfectly fine. But despite the grave dangers of the oceans being made of, well, literal lava, the lands aren't that much safer, for nestled on the dark netherrack shores, the deadliest biomes in Minecraft await your arrival. The Soul Sand Valley, an ominous blue biome filled with the scattered remains of fossils. Don't try running away here, the souls will slow you down, and there is very little escape. The Basalt Deltas, deadly jagged lands filled with pockets of magma and lava. Don't misjudge your jump, or you'll never recover. The Warp Forests, blue fungal forests that seem like a respite from the dangers of the Nether. But trust me, they're not. The Crimson Forest, red fungal forests that are home to the evilest pigs. They've got quite the appetite, and you are the main course. But despite all this peril, the Nether is not devoid of life, for lurking in each biome, there are entities that are just waiting for your arrival. From the ghasts to the magma cubes, they all want the same thing. You. Now, additionally, the Nether has structures. First, we have the Nether fortresses. While deceptively open plan, there's no hiding from the blazes or the wither skeletons that will stalk your every move as soon as you enter. And then there are the bastions. These blackstone hideouts are home to the mysterious piglins. Here they guard their treasures, violently striking down any who dare enter their domain. The piglins are the most advanced of the Nether beings, having somewhat formed a society within the refuge of their bastions. They barter with one another, engaging a trade that we would only realistically expect from, well, intelligent life. Some even dedicate themselves to growing in strength to become piglin brutes, so that they can even better protect their riches. They are brutal, and they are tribal. But the piglins are the citizens of the Nether. Well, until you come along and ruin it all. Okay, that's a little bit dramatic, but my overall point is that the Nether is a deadly wasteland, somehow filled with a great variety of biomes and creatures with complex social structures, and that all of this has happened under the most extreme conditions that we know of in the Minecraft universe. And so that brings me to the main point of this video. None of this should be possible. The Nether is so hostile to life that it shouldn't exist. the Nether should, in theory, be a dead wasteland. Allow me to explain. For one, there is no water. Due to the lava oceans and enclosed bedrock barriers, heat within the Nether has nowhere to go, and so as heat rises from the lava, it reaches the bedrock ceiling, but it can't escape. The heat remains trapped within the ecosystem of the lower Nether. As more heat is released from the lava oceans, more trapped heat accumulates in the lower Nether. This leads to the Nether getting hotter and hotter, and that sustains the Nether in its liquid state, as it's too hot for it to cool down, and thus it's prevented from solidifying. And this just means that more heat can be released, and so we sort of end up in this cycle of heat being released, the Nether getting hotter, which causes even more heat to be released, and that just keeps on repeating over and over again. The end result is that the Nether has become this boiling land, where water can't even exist for a brief moment. A block like a wet sponge will dry out instantly if placed in the Nether. This means that the Nether must be at least 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the boiling point of water. But why does any of that matter? Well, it means that life shouldn't be here. Water is crucial for life as we know it. You see, it's an excellent solvent, meaning it's great for cells when transporting nutrients and waste. It allows for complex biochemical reactions, as water in its liquid state allows chemicals to better move around and react with one another. Additionally, water helps organisms maintain stable internal temperatures, thus preventing overheating and any potential explosion from being too hot. Finally, water helps maintain cell structure and the shape of organisms. As you can tell, water is rather important for life, and so since the Nether is too hot for water, the Nether should be a dead land, with no possibilities of life ever generating. This state of death should be eternal for this dimension, with the Nether in theory never being able to cool down, and yet, somehow, the Nether has been able to overcome this great barrier and defy all logical possibilities, as life has found a way, despite the limitations of water. So how did this happen? How did life come about in the Nether, when it can't have liquid water? Well, first off, we're assuming that life in the Nether is carbon-based, and therefore needs water. But complex life, in theory, doesn't actually need to be either one of those two things. Life just needs a main element that can form complex stable bonds with other elements, and a liquid that can transport those elements around for reactions. Now, that is just a very oversimplified version of it, but that's really all life needs. However, we're a little bit biased, because it just so happens to be that, as of our best knowledge, carbon tends to be the best primary element for life, since all life on Earth is carbon-based, and water is a liquid at Earth temperatures and is found rather abundantly, and so we foolishly assume that other planets should also meet these same conditions if we want to find life. But we don't need that, because there are some other elements that could, in theory, exist that would also sustain life. One such example of an element like that is silicon, which is theoretically proposed to be the second best element for potential life, especially in hot areas. Now, no life that we're aware of today is silicon-based, but due to its somewhat similar atomic structure, it's proposed that silicon-based life should, in theory, be possible. And in fact, it could even be better than carbon for life in hotter conditions, due to silicon's greater boiling points. So unlike carbon life, theoretical silicon life could actually exist in a hot place, such as the Nether. Furthermore, silicon-based life could utilize different solvents, not just water. For instance, in theory, silicon-based life could use silicones, which are like silicon-based fluids, or sulfuric acids. These both have extremely high boiling points, which would, in theory, work well within the silicon-based life forms, but could also remain liquids within the heat of the Nether. And so it's possible that life only exists within the Nether because it's not the carbon-based life that we're familiar with. Rather, life here is made of a foreign material that we have never seen in life before. And this great difference in elements might also explain why life in the Nether is just so strange. So here's a brief explanation of how life could have overcome those challenges and become a reality within the Nether. Long ago, the Nether would have been a hot wasteland, where life was, well, non-existent. But slowly silicon particles might have begun to bond to one another, and thus the first very basic single-celled life might have emerged. This silicon life, over billions of years, would have evolved to better suit the heat, until it reached the optimum arrangement for the Nether's temperatures. At that point, it could have started to become multicellular. Originally starting out as small fungal life forms, silicon-based Nylium would have begun to cover the world. This silicon fungal life would have been unlike any carbon mushrooms that we know about. In fact, if it existed, it would have been so different that we can't even imagine what it would be like. Over time, these silicon fungal pockets would have adapted to their area within the Nether, mutating to better survive in the harsh conditions. Over time, this could have divided the silicon-based fungi, as each one mutated and evolved to deal with slightly different heat conditions, and thus over a very long time, this could have forged two main distinct life forms, the crimson fungi and the warp fungi. So they mutated in different directions and were no longer on one team of life. Instead, they became competition, and a battle might have begun to rage between the two. They competed for life in this hell dimension. Each one would have slowly evolved over a period of millions of years, just trying to outsurvive their enemy force, all while withstanding the great natural dangers of the Nether. Now, both of them would have grown massive mushrooms. The crimson's ones were red, and the warped blue. However, their strategies beyond that point were mostly different, for whilst the crimson sought to stay low to the ground, the warped fungi sought to get high and tower over the Darklands. These two survival strategies were greatly different, but both were rather effective, and they could have become the dominant forces within the Nether, with any other fungal life just being killed out. Now, for some reason, both sides of this war found it useful to evolve shroom lights, implying that there might have been some evolutionary reason that they wanted more light. Perhaps more light allowed them to grow more? We don't exactly know. But over time, as this war continued to ramp up, something would have happened. They would have grown too much, and the Nether itself wouldn't have been able to handle it. All this life was respiring way too many chemicals, from the silicon-based fluids to ammonia to sulfuric acid, and while this needs to happen for the fungal life to survive, it would have polluted the Nether, and thus it would have forced the atmosphere to become even hotter due to the chemicals trapping additional heat, and the world would have become, well, foggy. Now, this sudden increase in heat would have caused a lot of death for the fungal silicon forms, as the Nether would have suddenly become way too hostile to sustain their great numbers, and so the first mass extinction event would have occurred. The crimson fungi and the warped fungi would only survive if they stayed away and stopped warring. Any attempt to war with one another would have only led to the destruction of both sides, as they just couldn't afford to waste those additional resources. And so this event would have led to the isolation of the warp forests and the crimson forests, and their war was over. Now, it is possible that other fungal life existed in this time, but more than likely, they would have died out, leaving just those two forces remaining to this day. This great reduction in life forms left many areas filled with death, and this great volume of death could have, in theory, cooled down certain areas rather dramatically, allowing for some lava forms to theoretically cool in this time, and form basalt pillars. Certain areas with excess deaths could have turned the land into a world of trapped souls. The atmosphere would have been too dense for these souls to escape, so instead they would have been trapped in stands and gravels, which could have potentially led to the soul sand valleys. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, due to great chemical changes and more cooling, instability could have arisen in the lava oceans, and thus, lava geysers might have begun to erupt. But for the areas with excess deaths, just like the soul sand valley, a sudden cooling effect might have occurred, thus leading those geysers to rapidly cool down in certain areas, and so creating the basalt deltas. In the areas where the fungi life hadn't died greatly, and also hadn't been ruined by the lava geysers, or wasn't where the fungal life sought refuge, well, those could have become the Nether wastes. With the Nether finally stable in its great levels of heat, and with all these new chemicals in the atmosphere at great concentrations, complex life could have emerged. The stable temperatures meant that complex life didn't need to be constantly changing to meet the constantly changing demands of heat, and those abundant new chemicals would have provided the toxic air that could have been perfect for silicon-based life to breathe in. Maybe in this time portals from the overworld opened up into the Nether, bringing a few life forms from the overworld into the Nether, such as the pigs and the skeletons. Now they would have died instantly in these harsh conditions, but the basic silicon life forms might have found them, and they could have used their base structures to develop much sooner than naturally thought possible, learning from them and evolving. The pigs might have been taken in and fused by the fungi and basic silicon life forms at that time to create the far more complex hoglins and piglins. Well, over a very, very long time. You see, evolution is slow, but over time, these silicon-based life forms could have adapted to the harsh challenges of the Nether, using the primitive failed carbon versions as sort of like a backbone for their survival. And then eventually over time these advanced silicon-based life forms could have built the bastions and the fortresses. They could have been thriving within the Nether for millions of years. Now, nothing was easy, but life was slowly finding a way and surviving. Well, that is, until the beast arrived. But I'll get into that for a future video though. For now, let's just put that to one side and focus on the greatest challenge to the Nether civilizations. That being the Nether itself. You see, there's only so much Nether for them to expand into. This bedrock ceiling greatly limits their potential. And so, civilizations, because of their limited environments, are also limited. The Nether civilizations probably wish they had a world that was open and flat, just like the overworld. Life is so easy on that flat overworld. Except, wait, that's not entirely true, because the overworld isn't actually flat. Hold on, let me explain. Actually, just watch this video, it will tell you everything you need to know.